Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have a really awesome group, and we will hopefully share some really awesome. We will share some really awesome information with you. My name is Risa Shimoda. I'm the Executive Director of the River Management Society, and I hope you see 4 people and 5 panels. The other person's coming back in a second. So the rest of us, the team who will be sort of behind the scenes, but hosting you also, will introduce ourselves, and then we'll hand the program over to our speakers, our instructors today. So again, my name is Risa Shimoda, and I'm here in Tacoma Park, Maryland. The River Management Society, if you're not familiar with us, is a national organization of professionals, and our mission is to support professionals who study, protect, and manage U.S. rivers. And we're really thrilled to have worked on this river access planning guide with this team for a while, several years, and I will be in the background with my colleague Angie and Karita, kind of managing the chats and questions that you have.
Hi everyone, my name is Angie Furman. I am the River Training Center Coordinator at the River Management Society, and thank you all for joining us.
And my name is Karita Waters. I'm with the National Park Service, both the Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance Program and the Wild and Scenic Rivers Program. And the National Park Service helped work with River Management Society and the 2 principal authors, Tom and Jordan, to pull this river access planning guide together. We're really excited about folks using this resource. We have paper copies because of quarantine. They're sitting in my office, but we look forward to getting this guide out and used, and your feedback as you use it. It came about because of interest from our cohort of Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance staff who were looking for some different ways to actually look at river access planning along the whole linear scale, and not just site specific. We have a history of work on site-specific river access. And thanks to Tom and Jordan for helping really broaden the view and put together this great guide. So look forward to your questions.
All right, well, my name is Tom. I'm the Northwest Stewardship Director for American Whitewater and worked on this project with the National Park Service and River Management Society.
I'm Jordan Secter. I'm a landscape architect with AECOM. I've been involved with river recreation and restoration work for over 20 years, and look forward to presenting our work today.
Yeah, okay, so this is Tom. I'm going to launch in here, and good morning on the West Coast. That's where I'm located. Jordan and I are going to toggle back and forth a little bit here. Just want people to think about, when we talk about river access, what types of activities you enjoy and use rivers for. So for me, it's whitewater kayaking. If you want to put something in the chat of activities that draw you to rivers, it'd be interesting to see what the diversity is there. Today we're going to talk about this river access planning guide, which focuses on access not only for boats, but for all types of activities that people enjoy and engage in on river. So in today's presentation, what we're going to start out with is talking a little bit about the purpose and need for where this project came from, the genesis of this project, the core elements that we refer to in thinking about access and characterizing your site, and the steps that are used to implement the guide. And then we're going to give you a couple of examples of application that hopefully give you a little bit of real world perspective on how you use this thing. Okay, so first we want to talk a little bit about let's see, wait, I think that's the same. Let me just go to the next slide. So let's just talk about the purpose and need here and why this guide. So river managers from across the country were looking for ways to communicate the diversity of needs that exist on rivers, the different types of agency policies, river resources. This guide, it's not meant as a one size fits all, but just a way of thinking about how you approach river access. One of the key elements that we want to communicate is that access is about more than getting boats in the water. So often we think about, that interface where you're entering the water with your boat, but you might have people hiking along the river, engaging in day use activities, picnicking, fishing. With my kids, it might just be throwing rocks in the river, all those types of activities. And oftentimes when we enter these projects, sometimes we too often get focused on just thinking about the boat ramp or that interface to the water and not how everyone interacts with the water. And sometimes that can lead to user conflicts when you have, a picnic set up on the boat ramp. So really trying to think about all these different types of uses and activities for river access and engagement. Another goal of the guide was to think about access points along the continuum of a river system. So you might have high challenge areas in the headwaters, and you see these guys roping boats into a remote canyon. You may have more family use and activities along some of the middle sections, and then that last image, that's downtown Seattle, and people interfacing with the river that flows through an urban center. And one thing with rivers is there are these natural trails and corridors for travel through the landscape, and you enter at different places, and there's different types of experiences and a diversity of uses as you travel through these systems. We wanted to highlight where this guide that we put together fits in with some other materials that are out there. So there's a lot of resources out there. Some of these are on the River Management Society website. We've actually created an appendix in the River Access Planning Guide where we have a bibliography of these different resources and provide a little bit of background and context on what each of these tools can be used for. And what we produce is meant to complement these other resources. It's not a replacement for, but we want to make it known that there's some really good resources, particularly when it comes to site design and thinking about examples for what you might do in specific sites. So what we've provided, it's more of a framework for planning and how to think, but a lot of these resources have a lot of great examples in them that you can draw from. Okay, so looking at a river in a holistic sense, people use rivers for many different reasons, and we wanted to kind of think about those types of experiences. So as I'm going through these, feel free to add something to the chat if any of these resonate with you, or if you're think of ones that we've kind of missed. But one example of the type of activities that people might enjoy is just play. So engaging in activity for the simple enjoyment of spending time on rivers and just enjoying in that recreational experience of water play. Kids are really good at this. Challenge. So some users may be seeking a high challenge activity. We've got Dane Jackson here, Red Bull athlete on the North Fork of the Payette, in a high challenge activity, and how people interface with the river that are engaged in this type of activity would be very different from the two kids that I just showed that were engaged in play. Escape. So the Aniakchak River, Wild and Scenic River up in Alaska, very remote place, very hard to get to. It's a place where you can literally and figuratively escape from the world around us, escape from technology, escape from other people, and just be in this really wild and incredible place. And you know, hike in with a pack raft. Wonder, you know, for many people, you know, rivers and our relationship to rivers, there's, you know, just the wonder of this incredible landscape. Here along the Owyhee Wild and Scenic River, just this incredible place of awe and wonder that has captured human beings for thousands of years, literally. And just a place that you can sit back and enjoy that experience and wonder with the geology and the, you know, just the whole setting that makes the place. So that's a way that people can interface and interact with rivers. Community. So, you know, rivers often provide a sense of community, a gathering place, a place where we join together with friends. So, you know, this is a river access point where I've often seen people that are not even, they might not even be paddling anymore. You know, maybe they did at one time, but they know that on this river in the spring, the opportunity to gather and join with the community of river users is something that you can do in this space. So there's a nice big lawn, a place for people to hang out and join in fellowship and in community. And then this is when we started thinking about, you know, Jordan and I recently did a workshop last fall, but just the spiritual connection to rivers, and that extends across many cultures. In the region where I live in the Pacific Northwest, the rivers and the mist from waterfalls has spiritual significance to Native Americans, and how they access the river in places where there are waterfalls has implications for how, you know, site design is done in a manner that's respectful of that cultural heritage. And you know, and then also they have an interest in providing areas where there's, you know, not as much use and activity in those places. So these spiritual connections to water, you know, extend across millennia and across cultures, and it's something important to think about in how people interface with rivers. So this is one of the things that we just sort of want people to think about as they're first engaging on a project, is just what types of experiences are people enjoying on a river and experiencing, and that family-friendly play versus wonder versus high challenge, that has very important implications for how you design your site. So let's see, we're gonna switch right now. So I'm gonna hand it over to Jordan, but before I do that, Angie, did you want to, if we got any questions come in or anything we should respond to?
Does not look like there's any unanswered questions right now.
Okay, let me check. Pause for a moment. And Jordan, did you wanna add anything to what I just described, or and then I'll hand it off to you when you want to go to the next slide here on the core elements. We'll walk through those next.
I know, I think you hit it on the head. I think the thing is as we're working through all of these components and thinking about the experience mechanisms, to think about back to the problem statement that Tom had discussed, is that the launch site is an amenity of the access area. So we want to address what's happening at the launch to make sure that it's providing the opportunities necessary to get boats into the water, but that's not the only component of the access site.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will advance to the next slide here then, and you tell me when to advance, Jordan.
All right, thanks. Well, as Tom had mentioned, in order to to drive this this process, we developed what we call our core elements, and the elements are made up of these thinking components to provide structure, a structure to this sort of thinking structure that we can use for developing our the plan. So when thinking about we have system location, we have our thinking about our landscape setting, the temporal dependence, frequency, the density of use and the site capacity, the use type and challenge level, and management considerations. Tom, can you advance?
Yep.
The next slide. Yep. So the system and location is really trying to think about, like, step back to this sort of 10, 20,000 to 20,000 foot view, and, you know, really trying to understand where you are in the landscape and understand sort of the, you know, the regional context of which the system exists. So in this case, are you in a step pool system up in the mountains, or are you within you know, an alluvial reach, or a headwaters from a lake system, or are you out in an estuary? And, you know, thinking about this, where you are also, is it sort of a natural system, or is it more sort of urbanized? Next, Tom.
Yep.
So here's an example of just kind of breaking up. So in your planning considerations, thinking about your regional context. So this is a really nice diagram from the San Francisco Bay Water Trail group, where it's really highlighting, you know, where you are from the headwaters, you know, to that middle sort of pastoral system, and then down into the urbanized environment in the estuary. But this is also thinking about, well, not only, you know, where you are in the system, but what is the distance from, say, where you are in the mountains to our urban centers or a town? How often, you know, are people accessing these areas, and those types of considerations. So really thinking about this in terms of, you know, knowing where you are, what type of river environment you're within, and the relationships to the regional context. Next. So with that in mind, the regional context is next is understanding, you know, thinking about this in terms of landscape setting. So setting characteristics, really think about those, thinking about sort of how natural, enhanced, or constructed the setting is. So, you know, are you within, like, again, within an urbanized context, within a built environment? An enhanced setting could be a you could have an enhanced setting within an urbanized context. So thinking about a natural area park within that setting. So there can be like an overlap, and sort of how do we describe sort of the sensory relationship that you might have within, you know, a naturalized area within a constructed environment. And then there's like, then thinking about sort of what are the components of a natural experience. Tom had shown an experience where people were lowering boats, down cliffs onto the, into a gully to get to a river, which has a high challenge component, but it also within a very natural setting. So you have to bring, in that setting, you bring all of your gear and equipment with you in order to participate in that activity, where in the other environments that those pieces might be provided to you. All right. So an example next, Tom. So next, here is an example of a developed site within a regional park type system. It has, paved surfaces, curb and gutter edges, paved drop-off zone, kiosks, but then a natural beach sort of launch. There's a maintained grassy area. This is this is obviously an enhanced site. The other thing to think about here too is you might have an enhanced site that you're launching from and within, but as soon as you're on the river, you're within a natural setting. So really trying to, and then you're in a natural setting and for a number of miles until you're at the takeout, where then you're again within an enhanced or developed site within maybe an urbanized context. So you get to have so you have to think about that you have many components here, of which overlap. Next, Tom. So temporal dependence. We're thinking about the seasonality of use here. Is this a 1 season, 2 or 3 or 4 season activity? Are people accessing the river for different experiences, types of recreation, whether it's passive or active? In this case, this is this is a winter environment, so people are running the river in a winter setting. So and so thinking about the levels of use also within the seasonal setting is important. Next, Tom. So again, this is combined with the temporal dependence. We're looking next is the frequency of use. So within that winter environment, is there a low frequency, medium, or high use? When does it get higher? And are there multiple uses or multiple visits for different types of uses within a specific season? So and with identifying that sort of structure, we can start to think about how do we separate activities, what types of user conflicts may be existing between the season, the frequency of use, and next, and then the density. So as you can see here, this is a very popular tubing area, and with a high density of use within a particular summer season. I think this is in Texas. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, and where summers are quite humid, quite hot, and there's a major interest in being in the river or on the river, and as you can see, this is a very popular spot. So we have high density of use, high frequency of use within a single season, which has a major impact to the site, to the access area. Both on the shoreline, when we're thinking about infrastructure to support this types of use, this site does not necessarily sustain this level of engagement. And then there's the impact to the river itself. And so this is the type of thinking about our going back to our core elements, thinking about our temporal dependence, frequency, and density together helps me in understanding, how do we, who's using this, when, how often, and the carrying capacity of the site to be able to absorb that use. All with considering what are the types of desired experiences that the people are coming here want to have. Do people want to be on top of each other, like in this picture with the density, or do they want a little more space and just use need to be spread out and changed? So this allows us to start thinking about the programmatic function of the site and how do we want to plan for new experiences and uses, or disperse or mitigate for the conflicts we're finding at this one spot. Next, Tom. Lastly, in terms of building on this idea of experiences, we're thinking about use and challenge level together, and sort of going back to some of our recreation planning methodologies and thinking traditionally are these recreation activities passive recreation activities you experience, or active recreation activities? Are people showing up to the site to sit on a rock and paint, or take pictures, contemplate life, or are they actively in the river fly fishing, or do they need a launch point to launch a boat, a sailboat, or to access the water for swimming or another type of more active recreation activity? SUP use is up and very popular around the country, whether it's on moving water, surfing waves in a river, or flat water paddling sections, or even multi-day paddling using SUP. So again, there's different types of, with each type of paddle craft, there's also a different type of experience that people are trying to achieve, as well as an use and a different type of challenge level associated with the use of that craft. So here we're trying to just to see how are people using, relate back to the site, to the system and the system that we're looking at. How are people currently using these sites, and are there other uses and challenge level experiences that can be accessed at these locations that currently are not, and how can we forecast for those uses maybe occurring if popularity is increasing throughout the country, and changing how we use our rivers. Next, Tom. So lastly, in terms of our thinking process, in our core elements, we'd like to think about the management considerations and management framework of which these sites are located. A single site can be managed by a single agency, whether it's federal, state, county, city government, a tribal entity, local jurisdiction. They can also be adopted by sites can be adopted and have memorandums of understanding and different agreements between advocacy and stakeholder groups, which are also very important relationships to build in terms of how we maintain these sites. But the management frameworks and considerations need to be understood in terms of how we make changes both physically from a site design standpoint, as well as making sure our planning directives and goals and related experiences focus back to agency directives within comprehensive plans, recreation resource management planning efforts, and those types of things at all levels. Also, within these river systems, you might transect through the landscape from federal lands all the way through county and local jurisdictions as we move out of the national forest and into different areas and landscapes. And so we want to make sure that as we're looking at these systems, that we have identified the different agency resources and players that need to be involved in the discussions. Next, Tom.
Okay, so we're just gonna do a section break here, check in with Karita, see if there's anything more that's come up on the chat. Any questions before we move into the next section here?
Yes, we do. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yep.
Okay, so I think related, especially Jordan, to your most recent the management component of the work that we're doing, we had a question about how the river access guide may tie into a comprehensive river management plan, either before or after a river is designated wild and scenic. I know you all have an example from a wild and scenic river, and I think you mentioned a bit, Jordan, how existing planning processes might influence this, but do you have any other comments or thoughts? So I can say that again. How does the guide?
Yeah, Tom can answer should answer the part on the wild, how does it fit into the wild and scenic component, but how it fits into existing or comprehensive management practices. We would hope that the guide could provide a methodology to support the river recreation planning experience up front. What we're finding with a lot of our work is that there's existing resources that and RMPs that have already been developed, whether it's, you know, whether they're recent or if they're from, you know, 10, 20 years ago, we go back to those just to reference whether the values stated within those RMPs are still relevant to the community and to the resource area that we're working within.
Yeah, and this is tough. I mean, I just pulled the Skagit River CRMP off my bookshelf here, and I'm looking at, you know, there's sections on recreation experience level, existing inventory of existing sites, inventory of uses, difficulty of different rivers, potential future put in and take out sites along the river. So I think I think there's some direct application and some potential integration. You know, clearly what we're talking about is with this guide is something very conceptual in nature, and then, you know, when it comes to development of a specific site, you know, then you may have to do your own you know, environmental analysis associated with that. But certainly that's the conceptual level stuff that we're talking about here. I see really good opportunities for integration with the CRMP, and there's examples of that being done.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom and Jordan. We have time for one more question I want to present to you all. And I had a question, someone who lives close to the James River, and asked if the planning guide touches on ensuring accessibility across demographics. Where this person lives, access to the James River Park system is largely located in more affluent white areas, and it becomes, river access is a widespread issue, you know, and having equality across the board or equity for that. Does the guide touch on that?
Yeah, you know, that's something, I mean, certainly with what's happening in the country right now, that's very, you know, front of mind. And I'm looking at what we wrote and thinking, boy, that's something we should have probably addressed more directly than we have. I mean, we certainly talk about it in the context of, you know, trying to think about the diverse uses of rivers, and, you know, not just for one type of use. But I think if, you know, if I was writing this today in light of what's happening and some of the things are being, you know, challenged to think about, I think that's something that's probably a little, honestly, like a little bit of a shortcoming that we can touch on as well as we should thinking about.
Great. Yeah, I would
that's it. I'm sorry, that with that in mind, I think, you know, the thing that we are discussing in the book is that the rivers are this cross section that penetrate different types of communities, different types of places, and there's different types of people living around these rivers. And part of the planning process within the guide is to identify, you know, the stakeholders within those areas and those regional contexts, and make sure that they're involved. There's certainly a shortcoming to our planning currently that don't necessarily consider equity to the level and importance that it should be adequately implemented.
Great, thank you. And as for folks who are on the call, we welcome, you know, your examples that you can share and to share with us so that we can include other pieces to that. So thank you guys. I'll stop there. That was not my dog barking, it was my phone barking saying time was up. So that's it for our questions right now.
I don't know if you heard, it made my dog bark when he heard it.
Oh no.
Okay, so we're going to transition here to using the guide as a resource. So this will be kind of our second half. So Jordan's going to give a little quick overview of the different steps, and then we're just going to provide examples from a couple of projects on how we've been able to walk through this. So I will let's see, let you launch into this, Jordan.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Tom. So again, we're going to just give a quick overview of the 6 steps, and then Tom is going to provide an example of how these steps were applied to a project. And then I'm going to provide another example of a project that's just starting up, and how the steps are being used to apply to that case study. So we've tried to break out these and apply the core elements within a series of steps. Oh, I lost you, Tom. We lost the presentation. Oh, there we're back.
It's back.
So we're trying to.
I can't mute it. All right, sorry. I was trying to see if I could mute it, but no, it doesn't work. All right, keep going.
So again, we have a 6-step. We try to apply the core elements, this thinking process, and break it out into these these 6 steps. So step 1 is to assess, as you can read, assess and summarize existing conditions in river inventory. Step 2, identify the types of desired access and experiences. Step 3 is define the recreation setting based on the setting characteristics, which are these social, biological, and managerial, which are a component of the recreation opportunity spectrum. So we're borrowing from that. Evaluating the options and selecting preferred sites, and then addressing facility design, and then monitoring our achievements. So next, Tom. So step 1 is assess and summarize existing conditions in river inventory. So as you can see here, we're getting, and this step is a combination of both desktop and field inventory, using GIS again to understand the regional context of where we are and the setting and the system, and then getting out on site and looking at how what are the existing conditions, how is it being used, what are the impacts from existing recreation activities and visitation, how does the dynamic condition of the river impact the ability of use within specific seasons, and how does the frequency of use potentially, how has that impacted specific sites, and it's really important again to sort of think through all of those as we're doing our existing condition summary, and inventorying the river, to go back to those core elements and think through all of those different components. Next, Tom. Step 2 would be to identify desired types of access and experiences and working with stakeholders. So as we're doing our existing conditions, what are people using? What are their experiences? What is the access types happening? And then working with the stakeholders, thinking about, are those experiences being achieved? Are people able to experience a high level visitor experience on those sites as it sits? If not, what are those desired experiences? How can we make improvements? Identifying the issues, working with stakeholders, how can we mitigate those issues on site and throughout the system? Here is also starting to think about the sites a little bit related to the experiences, and just because thinking about this contextually, and on a project Tom and I worked on the Clackamas River was are the existing access sites, are they the appropriate, do we need to improve those as is, or are they the right sites or not? And we actually found that they were, that we used a completely different set of sites and closed and restored those areas so we could meet this sort of new desired set of experiences that the stakeholders were asking for. Step 3. So define the desired recreation setting in terms of social, biological, and managerial considerations. So these are the setting characteristics. So as we're starting to identify new opportunities, we really want to put them in context of like the social setting. This would be, who's accessing the site and how. This would be an equity, a discussion of equity, access, in context as well as passive and active recreation. The biological resource needs to be considered here. The state and condition of the riparian area, bank erosion, those types of things. And also accessibility related. Can we get people down through a sensitive resource area and site to the river? And then the managerial connections. Again, thinking about what's the management framework we're working within, who's the leading agency, and what are the directives communicated within those agency resources and manuals. Next, step 4. So evaluating site options and selecting preferred sites. So this is, again, if we're within a river within a system and there's multiple sites, we start to think about how many sites do we need and for what uses, and how often will they be accessed, for what purposes, and how do they relate to each other. So can we have 3 sites that provide sort of a site 1 and 2 is their half-day trip. Site 1 through 3 would be a full-day experience on the river if you're from the launch point. So are they a connected series of sites creating a river trail system, or are these single sites that are visited for both active and passive recreation, where the launch point is an amenity of the river access site, and otherwise the site's purpose and intent programmatically is for different types of day use activities. So this is where we're sort of comparing and contrasting our options, and then preferring specific and identifying our preferred sites based on meeting our desired conditions, desired and future conditions that we're trying to achieve. Step 5. Oh, sorry. Here's.
I go to that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Step 5 is good.
I'll go to. Okay.
So this is this here is step 5 is once the sites have been identified, we are actually starting to look at the facility design, constructability, and the ability to implement the project. With this, in this example, in this photo along the Klamath River at a point where a site has been potentially identified for river access, but we're looking at infrastructure, large amounts of infrastructure that needs to be pulled out, steep rocky banks, which make it difficult to construct any sort of physical launch site to get down to the river levels. So it really, and then so cost consideration comes in here, and timing, construction timing as well. A point like this is we need to start to think about, so what are the trade-offs between construction timing, constructability, and the ability to implement, and is this the highest and best use of our money, and how much infrastructure do we need to put in? So again, if we're in kind of a naturalized setting and we're going to pull out all this infrastructure, we're going to naturalize the site so it matches this sort of remote area that we're within and restore it. How do we relate the site back to the setting, and will the amount of infrastructure we need to build this meet that goal? It could be too developed for what we're trying to achieve for the user experience. And step 6. And step 6 is monitoring our goals and understanding what went well, what didn't, and the challenges to what we've implemented. So such as tidal changes or sediment deposition, eroding away the launch point. Also, this is our opportunity to innovate through design, to provide sustainable access. In this photo, this is from our trip to the Ozarks last fall, where Tom and I implemented a training, but this was an engineered mat that was put down and backfilled with gravel to provide a launch into the river, and it was interesting to monitor the to hear the engineer talk about what went well, what didn't go well, The river interacts with its floodplain here quite up the banks, quite high. And so what's happening with this mat is that the gravel in between the tiles is eroding away. The mat is staying in place, and it's stabilizing the embankment, which is really, really good. And so it's doing its job. But there's additional maintenance to support accessibility along the ramp, because without the gravel in between, it makes it very difficult to walk. So the maintenance considerations are higher than they would have that they were expecting. But it's achieving, again, stabilization goals, which is great.
Okay, well, let's just take a quick pause here. And Angie, if there's any other questions that have come in, and then I'm going to jump into an example here. I'm going to run through quickly.
This is Risa. I'll jump in really quick.
Okay.
There aren't new questions, but I just wanted to have you not, Tom, you were talking about maybe the guide should have addressed some of the cultural access issues, another slightly different or secondary use of the word access, but I think it actually does. In steps 2 and 3, you look at appropriateness of what it is that you might be planning, and I'd suggest that in the context of this current world that we're living in, that the question about access that that Dan was talking about is one that asks us to step back even before we think about using the guide and asking, where should there be access? What's wrong with this picture? How can we have a whole city, a mile long reach of the river in a city that has no access or something like that? But I think really the guide does a great job of asking all the good questions early enough on it in a process that has begun.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I just, in retrospect, I think having something explicit about the equity lens would have been good. But, the context is there, but being explicit, I think what we're learning is important. So
yeah.
Let me just run through an example here of where we applied this. So this was a project with the RTCA program on the National Park Service Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance Program on the Nooksack River. And I'm not going to go through everything, but just provide a couple of examples for what this looked like on a river. So when we were looking through the core elements, so one of them that we talked about was frequency and another was density. And in this case, we had a high frequency of use, but a low density of use. So what that meant is high frequency, it was happening every day, with the local community. The regional community was using it, a little bit more on summer weekends, but it's rarely in use by more than one or two groups at a time. You did have a commercial outfitter that was offering up to a trip or maybe 2 a day, with just 4 boats. So anyway, so we just started, this is the kind of thing that you start to build out when you're looking at these core elements, is start to build out this story of the place and how is it being used. And the guide discusses the other core elements, but I just want to present this as an example. And this is something you do in step 1 to get a better perspective on that existing use. So in step 2, we talked about defining the desired recreation experience. And again, this is on the Nooksack River. We were looking at a potential development of a new site. In thinking about the desired recreation experience, we looked to other sites in the river corridor and in the system to look at those precedent examples for what type of experience is there now and what type of experiences might people expect and be appropriate in a new system. So this is just one example of starting to inform that development of the desired access and anticipated uses. So again, step 1, looking at existing. Step 2, starting to think about that desired condition and building a narrative around that. So in step 3, there's a few different elements there, looking at social considerations, biological considerations. I want to just highlight what we did for management. So that was one of those that we talk about there. So looking at your management and regulatory framework, we took some time to look at, who were the managers along this river corridor. We had the Forest Service administering an eligible wild and scenic river. We have state lands that are under a habitat conservation plan. It's in a county that has its comprehensive parks, recreation, and operations plan. They have a shoreline management plan. There's a local land trust that they have their own mission and focused on preservation and providing walk-in recreation to some of their lands. We have private timber in the basin, and then there's also private ownership. So really, just started to, again, this is just looking at the management and regulatory framework, but pulling these documents together, looking at the guidance that's available and often good work that's been done. In the case of the county, we had some really good information from their comprehensive parks, recreation, and operations plan that helped inform what we wanted to do on this river system and provided, some of the support and backing for being able to do that. And then in step 4, we talk about this evaluation of site options. So in this case, we looked at a dozen sites and started to evaluate them and looked at some of the considerations. For example, how far downstream is it from the put in? Okay, find a site that's 9 miles. It's ideal for a day trip. If it's 20 miles downstream, that's probably too far. What's the channel stability look like? So going back and looking at the historical aerial photos and channel maps, looking at salmon habitat, ownership, what are the safety and sight lines along the highway for egress and entrance to the site? What's the visitor experience in terms of the character, the distance for people to walk into the site, from the river, and who's using it. So we start to, one of the things Jordan and I want to do moving forward is actually to build out some worksheets to help guide people through this process of how would you do a site evaluation. We've got some good conceptual information in the guide, but I think we can do a little bit more and just sort of guiding people through this process of what are the site characteristics. There's another project that River Management Society is doing with Confluence Research to build a database of different sites and different attributes with sites that I think will be helpful too. And then in step 5, that's where we talked about starting to develop your actual plan for the site. So in this case, on the Nooksack River, we did that evaluation. We did all that work thinking about user experiences and what people are looking for, and that informed development of a conceptual plan. Eventually, we'll transition this to engineering drawings. Right now, we're just using this to secure funds and resources for a grant application. But then we'll be taking this the next step. But I just wanted to provide that as a summary of just an example of being able to apply these steps to a river system where we've been working. And then Jordan's going to touch on the Willamette River Trail here briefly. So you want to take that away, Jordan? Like a couple minutes here?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. So I just wanted to quickly touch on the Willamette River Paddle Trail guide update, because this is an interesting project. This is a project that was developed in 2000, and water trail that came to into concept in around 2002. So it's been around for about 18 years. It's one of the first regional water trail systems in the country. It's a total of 187 miles in length, and it runs north from above Eugene, from the Middle Fork and Coast Fork Willamette rivers to culminating at the confluence with the Columbia River systems. And it runs through multiple cities, municipalities, rural farmlands, and so there's tons of different types of access and uses along the river. Next, Tom. The paddle guide currently the paddle trail is managed by a nonprofit called the Willamette River Keeper organization out of Portland, and it's and they solicited the funds originally to develop the paddle guide. The paddle guide currently is communicated in 3 different booklets through 3 different sections of the river, of which they want to integrate that into one, change the scale and integrate that into one communication device for wayfinding and interpretation along the river. What this project is a rework of this guide, but in order to do that, we have developed a scope using our guidebook as kind of the methodology, where we're doing a river inventory of features and trails on the sites. We're identifying the desired user experiences to see whether people are still how they're using the trail, and and what types of desired experiences they would like. What are the type we're remapping the types of access along the river, and who the agencies, what are the management, what's the management framework and agencies, and have they addressed issues associated with river access, and the types of access. What are those facilities? What are the seasons of use at the different spots, and the levels of skill. And all this data will be collected and updated within the new paddle guide here. Next, Tom. Here are just a couple examples of some traditions that have developed over the last 18 years. These are the Witches of Portland. They do an annual Halloween paddle on the Willamette River, which is pretty exciting. Next, Tom. We have access issues on our boat ramps, which this is a consideration all across the country, where we have single access along the motorized boat ramp, and they get clogged with people getting ready for their paddle trips. In this case, a lot of times what we see is a motorized boat in the background waiting waiting for their turn to access. And as we know, paddle trips, people take a while to pack and repack and their boats for their day trip. So we're needing to identify how these places are can be changed, or have they been changed. And then the next big piece to this is really recognizing that rivers are dynamic environments and forever changing. And for multi-day trips, especially on the Willamette River, there are places that were takeouts for resting points and overnight locations that no longer exist due to the river moving within its floodplain and its change and how it's changed over 8. So the one major thing that we will be implementing here this summer in terms of our inventory is identifying what's still there and what's not there, and what are the new locations that can be mapped, or how can we communicate in our wayfinding guide that the dynamic nature of the system, and how to choose a site sustainably for this type of desired experience. And that's it.
Yeah. So that wrapping up here, we have paper copies of the River Access Planning Guide available once Karita can get back to her office. I've got the URL there for the digital copy. You can just find it on the River Management Society by going to their library page, and then Recreation Management and River Access Planning. And then I'll put our contact information up here too. So this is all of us available as a available as a resource. And we just finish with that. And then Angie or Karita or Risa, if you have any last thoughts or anything we should touch on here, I'll let you jump in here.
This is Risa. We don't have other questions. We had lots of enthusiasm and support for the things that you were saying, Tom, but I think that folks were with their rapt attention. They were just listening to what you guys were presenting. I'd just like to thank everyone for attending today. We're at the top of the hour. if you have any last, questions, kind of, we can stick around for a few minutes, but I think we're through. So thank you so much. Reed, any last words?
I'll just add, thank you guys, and thanks for the great questions from people, things that we want to consider as we move forward with the guide. There was one comment, a person who was interested in the inventory sheet and really appreciated the way that this guide looks at the bigger picture, and sometimes we get so focused on that one site. So thank you for your time, and thank everyone for their attention.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, everyone. We're going to call it. We're going to wrap.